Good evening, and welcome to Hello, It's Us. Hello, It's Us is dedicated to educating the general public about issues related to disability. We believe that as we complete that process, or strive to do so, we will be educating you on issues that are important to everyone. Issues that are important to people with disabilities are important to the general public as well. My name is Mike Hoenig. I work as a program coordinator at the Center for Disabilities and Development, and I am a co-host for Hello, It's Us. Keith?
And I'm the other co-host, and I'm writing a book, and I'm retired.
We'll look forward to it. We're going to have you on and talk about that book one of these days.
It's good to have you, Simon.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get started, we want to acknowledge our sponsors. The Hello, It's Us is a collaboration between the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development, Uptown Bill's Coffee Shop, and our good friends here at Public Access Television. And with that, yes, we are very pleased this evening to have a special guest, Simon Andrew, who is the ADA coordinator with the City of Iowa City. Do we have the title correct?
That is correct. Assistant to the City Manager and the ADA Coordinator.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for having me.
Could you tell us a little about your background and what brought you to Iowa City?
Sure. I grew up in eastern Iowa, grew up in Cedar Rapids for my entire childhood. I came to Iowa City for my undergraduate studies. Got my degree from the University of Iowa in political science. Have a master's in public policy from University of Northern Iowa. And after that program completed, I took an internship here with the City of Iowa City in the City Manager's office. So that would have been 2011. That's when I got my first taste of working in local government, and it's been fantastic. I fell in love with it immediately and really wanted to learn as much as I could as quickly as I could. I went to graduate school expecting to work in the nonprofit field, and that's where the ADA coordinator role, I think, has been a very good fit for me, that I'm able to work with some of the issues and advocate for some of the issues that I went to school for, but still doing it within a local government rather than with a nonprofit agency.
I would guess in your role that you've been able to connect up with some of the local nonprofits that have an interest in ADA implementation.
Absolutely. A lot of our, especially with the public infrastructure piece of what we do, the curb ramp sidewalk networks are something that we work closely with local agencies on. When a service is being provided in a given neighborhood, we have to make sure that, given that there may be a higher demand for accessible features in that neighborhood, that's really where we try and focus on.
Great.
Simon, what are your primary duties as the ADA coordinator?
Sure. I mostly focus on Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is access to public facilities and programs. So not just the public infrastructure, but also our buildings, making sure that we're working towards improving accessibility in all of our buildings, our parks, as well as programs, that may or may not occur on city grounds or in city facilities.
Does a restaurant have to consult with you when they refurbish? If they weren't accessible before, do they need to consult with you before they start?
They do with the city. That's not part of my role. That's Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act applies to private facilities. But when they do have building permits, based on different thresholds and square footages, how many stories the building is, they do have to provide those updates when they do their project. But that goes through the Department of Neighborhood and Development Services.
So that would be the city, for instance, has an architect or a group of architects or design engineers or something that would review those specifications to ensure that they're up to code?
Sure. It's the same division. It's the Building Inspections Division. It's the same one that oversees new construction as well. They do all of the permitting, and the requirements of those permits are that all of those features are reviewed throughout the process.
Okay.
Good.
Oh, go ahead, Keith.
Go ahead.
No, I was just kind of, you tap into things as you were talking, and of course, one of the things that is maybe a little more subtle, maybe not quite as obvious as, when people think they tend to, of the ADA, there's, in the past anyway, there's been more of a tendency, I think, toward physical accessibility in buildings and ramps and so forth. One area of program accessibility that's near and dear to my heart has to do with communication. So, for those of you that may not be aware that are viewing this program, I'm totally blind, and so, I rely on Braille. I rely also on a lot of electronic opportunities to access information. I haven't gotten as sophisticated as many of my peers who've gone to smartphones, but I do use screen reading technology and so forth, and access a lot of information on the web, whether it be city council meetings information, or maybe it's the calendar for garbage pickup, things like that I can actually go on. I live in another community, and that is something that well, to be honest, there have been mixed reviews. There have been times when I have been able to go on to my community's website and, for instance, get the garbage pickup calendar very well. But when I've tried to access city council minutes and city council agendas, maybe not so much. So I'm curious, and this is not like a trick question, because I think every city is going along in their own way trying to meet all of these requirements. But how is this an issue that has come to your attention here in Iowa City, and that you've devoted some time to addressing?
Absolutely. That's something that we're really proud of in the last couple of years, the improvements we've made to the website. Prior to roughly the 2013 timeframe, we had a website that was developed in-house. City staff put it together, did all the programming. We started a process then to piggyback on the university's website.
Oh.
Now the University of Iowa hosts our website. We have a contract with them for it, and really the impetus for doing that and moving that direction is we did have a lot of documents online that couldn't be read. They would be PDFs or images that screen readers just couldn't handle. And so that was really the nexus of that project, was to make sure that our website is accessible to those with visual impairments. That's something that the Department of Justice has really focused on in recent years as well, is website accessibility. And so we were really fortunate that we started that project before the Department of Justice really started moving forward with those new standards, and really put us in a good position to be meeting that ahead of the game.
That's so awesome. I think that what happened in my own community is that nobody, maybe people just weren't as proactive on it. Maybe they didn't, sometimes it's the squeaky wheel. And I mean, I don't think our city is uncommitted to but I think it was a brand new issue. And so I guess one of the messages that we always try to promote here on Hello, It's Us is people with disabilities and families, if you do have concerns about whatever issue that's a barrier that's preventing you from accessing information or accessing structures, it's upon us as people with disabilities and advocates to really advocate.
Absolutely. And you had asked, or Keith had asked, what my main duties as the ADA coordinator are, and that's really the primary function that I have with the city. I'm not an engineer myself. I don't design the curb ramps. I'm not a traffic planner. That's not my background. It's really to give that interaction with the public, with advocacy groups, and to make sure that those questions, complaints, issues are being dealt with by the appropriate people within the city.
Okay, Simon, since you've been here, what do you think are some of the most accomplished ADA-related improvements since you've been here?
Sure. In the last few years, we've been really proud of the work the Metropolitan Planning Organization of Johnson County has done with their curb ramp and sidewalk network map. They spent a couple of years sending technicians out in the field, and they measured the slope, the direction, whether there were truncated domes, basically every aspect of every curb ramp in the metropolitan area. So this includes Coralville and North Liberty as well, Tiffin, University Heights. University Heights is small enough as an organization that they don't have the same Title II requirements that Iowa City does, but this has been an incredibly useful map in figuring out the best way to address our sidewalk accessibility. That having all of this data available allows us to coordinate projects with, say, a water main project or other projects that are going forward. We can map it with complaints that come in or requests that come in, and really allows us to do the most improvements as we can for the resources that we have with which to do them. And this was really the start of City Council in the last couple of years has devoted a lot more financial resources to completing curb ramp and sidewalk infill projects. When I started, we budgeted around $600,000 for asphalt overlays every year, and that's for street reconstruction, and about 15% of those dollars go to new curb ramps and sidewalks. That's up to $1.5 million a year. Just in the last couple of years, we've increased that significantly. So that's another, $100,000 to $200,000 for curb ramps coming out of that project. We also, when I started, did $50,000 every other year for requests that came in for specific locations. That's been doubled each of the last 2 years, so now it's $100,000 every year. And then we also devoted $100,000 from CDBG funds this year to complete a good number of curb ramp projects. So that's really the biggest movement that we've had in the last couple of years, is looking at that piece of our infrastructure, putting ourselves in a position that we can do the most that we can possibly do in the next few years, and devoting more resources to it.
Are those primarily improving existing ramps, resurfacing, that kind of thing, or are there some that didn't exist?
By and large, it is improving ramps that do exist.
Okay.
So we have approximately 5,000 curb ramps in the city, somewhere between 4,800 curb ramps in the city, and there are maybe about 200 locations left that don't have a ramp at all. By and large, what we have are ramps that don't meet current specifications. They either were constructed before truncated domes, before the tactile warnings were part of the standards, so they don't have those. Those are the red paneled ones around the city, yes. But they don't have those domes, which are very important to have, or they no longer meet slope requirements. Over time, with freeze and thaw cycles, roads heave, sidewalks heave. They don't stay the condition that they were constructed in. So we periodically have to go back and reconstruct those. So that's the lion's share of the ramps that are installed. The new ones that get installed are typically where a sidewalk didn't exist. We also have funds budgeted for sidewalk infill projects on top of those curb ramp dollars that install sidewalks in neighborhoods that don't have a sidewalk at all. So those by nature are brand new installations, but they're not a place where there's currently a raised curb at a sidewalk.
Simon, does anyone have the ability to inspect the existing curb ramps? Because some of those bubbles are being melted away.
Yep, and they sometimes can chip off.
Yes.
There was a period where they were more likely to be stamped into the pavement rather than the cast iron that we put on top now. So they are in varying levels of condition, and that is one of the data points that the technicians, as part of the MPO's inventory, did. So they measured cross slope, running slope, the dome condition, whether it was a diagonal ramp or a perpendicular ramp, whether it goes out where one ramp serves both directions, essentially points out into the middle of the intersection, rather than the more desirable, perpendicular with two stubs that go straight across the street. Whether there was a receiving ramp on the other side. Obviously, a curb ramp doesn't do you any good if there's no sidewalk or ramp on the other side of the street. Once you cross, they took a photo of each of the curb ramps, and this is all publicly available. You can research it online, and you can click on any of the exact locations, and it will give you all of the data for that location. One of our hopes with having this posted publicly is that we'll be able to get feedback. You know, that's one of the challenges with this. We spent years collecting this data, but it changes over time.
Yes.
You know, some of those domes become damaged, or you know, there's construction in the area that they get updated, and so keeping that data fresh is a challenge. And so we're hoping that having this publicly available, if somebody finds something on there that is inaccurate, or there is a location that they want us to address more quickly than is currently in our capital improvement plan, that we can make that happen.
One of the things that I was surprised about, and I must admit that I don't know the ADAG regs as well as I should, was that there are alleys in town which also have the domes on them. Is that required as well?
It is not always required. It depends on if it's a public alley or a private alley.
Okay.
And whether or not it's required in any given circumstance, it's definitely a good idea. And so we try and make sure that even in cases where the access board standards don't require a given improvement, that we encourage it. You know, for instance, with the rooftop patios that council recently adopted an ordinance for, in some cases it wouldn't have been required that they install an elevator. But we made it a requirement of having the rooftop patio just by local ordinance, that's such a benefit to the business that we felt that in order to be allowed to do that, that the elevator will be required even if the ADA doesn't require it. So we do try and proactively do those things, and over time that's a benefit, because in general these requirements and standards become more strict and more restrictive.
Yeah,
and so it's the right thing to do, both for the public and to prepare for the future, knowing that that's likely going to be required at some point in the future anyway.
With those rooftop access, would that only pertain to new buildings going up?
Nope, it pertains to existing buildings as well.
Okay.
So if an existing bar or restaurant downtown wants to add a rooftop patio, which previously weren't allowed, they do have to install a fully accessible elevator.
One of the things that, and I think this actually predates you, and I guess my point in bringing it up is the importance of, again, speaking out. And I don't know if this is an ADA requirement, but when Iowa City first started bringing in the sidewalk cafes, especially like down along Washington Street, many times there was no fencing or anything. And so I more than once came really close to upsetting someone's lunch because I was walking through and there was no warning. All of a sudden these tables are just out there. And I contacted a city councilwoman at the time and said, man, you know, and sure enough, I don't think it was just because of me, but you know, within the next year, I think they installed fencing which surrounded all of those cafes. And again, boy, that makes all the difference, you know, a safety issue and just an access issue and everything. So I don't know, was that in fact before your time, or do you remember any of that?
It was, the requirement for the fencing was before my time, but you're correct that is a very important feature that has to be required, especially as they are set up now. You know, our sidewalks weren't designed with these cafes in mind, so having a straight path of travel is really important for accessibility, and we don't have that in many places just based on the configurations of the sidewalk that was previously there before we had cafes. But that's an important component of the streetscape project as well. The construction that's going on right now on Washington Street is to have better defined planter areas or cafes that leaves that 8 to 10 foot width of travel without having to have a pedestrian weave their way around different cafes or different obstacles in the street.
Well, I would think it would even help mothers or fathers pushing strollers.
Absolutely. Strollers, shopping carts.
Yes.
You can't ride a bicycle in the downtown district, but on the sidewalk, but in areas where you can cycle on the sidewalks, you know, all of these improvements, like you said, to open the show, it's not just, you know, for accessibility issues. These improvements benefit us all, that it really makes the city more livable, more walkable, a better place to live.
Simon, are there any major projects that the city and university will be working on together about accessibility?
We have been, I've been getting to know university ADA coordinator
Yeah.
and
Oh, good.
facilities management staff. I think you've had Brian on your
Yep,
show
a couple
before.
times.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, great guy, very good to work with. He gives us all kinds of great information and ways to improve the way that we audit our facilities, and he's been a big help. We do have some joint projects in terms of, they might not be a joint project, but coordinating with a project that is moving forward. For instance, the Grand Avenue, the university's doing their steam tunnel under the road there, and we had some coordination on the sidewalks and ramps and what would be the accessible path of travel both during construction and what would be ideal once construction's over. So those are the ways in which we mostly work together. We do have some exciting projects coming up. I'd mentioned the inventory that we did of our sidewalk network. We're also going to do that for our parks and for our older facilities. Our newer facilities, by and large, are doing pretty well.
Yes.
But we do have a lot of challenges in City Hall. We have a lot of challenges in Robert A. Lee Rec Center, just based on the age of the building and the way that they've been adapted over time. So those audits of those facilities will be very instructive in terms of how we move forward with improvements at those buildings. Same with park facilities, making sure that there's accessible paths to pavilions and other amenities to make sure that those are accessible as they need to be.
Are parks required to have a certain amount or number of accessible playground equipment, things like that? Do you know if that's an ADA provision or?
I don't know if there's a threshold. I'd have to double check if there's an actual number associated with it. Certainly, the equipment that exists people need to be able to get to it. And as we saw with the new playground that went in at Mercer, that's a really strong component of how these are designed anymore. That generally you buy them sort of out of the box. It's sort of one size fits all for different communities, and so we do have input on the different pieces, but by and large those are coming prepackaged anymore with accessible pieces for kids to play on.
That's great. I think Keith and I have been kind of kicking around the idea of doing even like a little ADA history show, and I think when you think about the many ways that the ADA has contributed just to our society, that's a perfect example, just because of the social awareness now.
Absolutely, that's really the biggest piece that we try and focus on is the education. Regardless of what regulations are in place or what inspections we do, there's always going to be a situation in where somebody in a building, say, puts a potted plant in a hallway and it didn't cross their mind. Maybe they're not as aware of these issues as they should be, and not necessarily anything malicious, or they just haven't been exposed to some of the concepts. And so really having this outreach and advocacy piece is a way to make sure that we're doing the little things we need to do. Not necessarily a $1 million ramp to a facility, but where the paper towel dispenser is, or where the signage is for restrooms, things like that are really important pieces that can sometimes fall through the cracks in a facility. So really making everybody aware of that is an important part of it.
I do have a compliment for the construction company that is laying that cable. They're doing everything they can to make it accessible, even while they're doing it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that, and we'll pass that on to the contractor.
They've really been aware.
And it's hard to do.
Yeah.
When you have construction that's that disruptive, you have to be very mindful of it and work really hard to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So thank you.
One of the things that we are proud of here in Iowa City is that the annual ADA anniversary celebration, and this is our first plug for that celebration coming up on July 23rd from 10 to noon, right, Keith?
Yeah.
10 to noon at the Ped Mall.
Yeah.
And so this is, we'll be talking more about that in a future episode, or maybe a couple, because we really want people to show up for that. But I'd be interested, Simon, in hearing about any past involvement that you've had with that celebration, and just your thoughts on how it benefits Iowa City, just in terms of a chance to celebrate and a chance to educate on disability and the ADA.
Sure, absolutely. As a participant, last year was my first year participating in the event. I had attended before, but hadn't gotten up to speak. So last year I introduced a couple of speakers and spoke about the importance of the event, like you said, as an educational event, and you know, how far we celebrate how far we've come, but also recognize how much more we have to do. And it was an opportunity to talk about, from the city's perspective, how best to come to us with questions or concerns or issues that we need to address, and to make sure that the public and the audience there that day was aware that we always have an open door, and we always take these issues very seriously. And really, in my role at work, it's my top priority is to make sure that these are that any questions or complaints we get are handled quickly and as best they can be. This coming summer, I will be speaking again, introducing the speakers at the event. So
Great.
I am honored to have been asked to do it, and I really enjoy it. And this year I won't have RAGBRAI coming through right before that I was working hard on.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit easier from my end this year, I think.
Oh boy, yeah,
that was a busy day.
It was.
But you know, to your point about it being a celebration and an educational opportunity, that gets back to what I was saying about making sure that we keep accessibility issues in the forefront of people's minds, and that it's not an afterthought when a project's being undertaken or when a facility or a program's being designed, but that really making sure that everything we do as a public organization is open to everybody, and that everybody can, because we all contribute to the cause. You know, we all pay our taxes.
And we all use that accessibility.
Absolutely.
Even non-disabled.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So it's really important to make sure that we're consistently getting that message out there.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's a good way to have fun. And kind of our last question, I think, is just if people have ADA-related concerns pertaining to the city, do they contact you? Do they go online and fill out a form, or what's the best way for people to express those concerns?
Sure. However is most convenient to the person with a concern. We do have an online form. We have on icgov.org, there's a link for accessibility and ADA issues, which has all of my contact information on it. A grievance form if the individual isn't getting the answer that they think that they need. And yeah, that can be done by phone, email, online, paper copy, come in and see me. My office is at 410 East Washington Street in City Hall, floor 1A. My phone number is area code 319-356-5010. And city email addresses are first name hyphen last name at iowa-city.org. So mine's Simon, S-I-M-O-N, hyphen Andrew, A-N-D-R-E-W, at iowa-city.org.
Wow. Now that is a lot of ways to get in touch with Simon. That's terrific. Well, I want to thank you, Simon, and Keith will take some time here too, but I just want to personally thank you. I had never met Simon before, so it was a pleasure to get to know you and to learn about your work with the ADA and your commitment to it. And I want to thank all of our audience for tuning in, and hope you will take advantage of the opportunity to touch base with Simon, and especially come out to the ADA celebration.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Simon.
Thank you both so much.
Giving
This is great to see you again, Keith.
us-
It was nice to meet you as well, Mike.
Excellent.
Have a good week out there. Take care. Bye now.